It's gone. It's all gone. How could I let this happen?
Good as new.
What's your name?
Rachel Spates.
Rachel Spates.
Rachel.
Rachel Spates, 32 years old. As a night cleaner at Sterling Finance, she had spent 8 years making the invisible visible, or rather, making the visible invisible. Fingerprints on glass walls, coffee rings on mahogany desks, the tracks executives left behind after another day of moving millions. In this sterile world where numbers meant everything and people meant nothing, there was almost nothing she hadn't cleaned. But tonight was different. Under the fluorescent hum of the 40th floor, Rachel was wringing out her microfiber cloth, mentally calculating which offices still needed attention before her shift ended at 6 a.m. 3 more executive suites, the conference room, and then the elevator banks. Her daughter Emma's tuition payment was due in 2 days, and Rachel couldn't afford to miss a single night. But then, from an open office about 30 feet down the corridor, she heard something that made her pause. Cursing. Frantic, desperate cursing. The moment she instinctively moved closer and peered through the glass door, Rachel's hands froze on her cleaning cart. Inside the office was a man in an expensive suit, his tie loosened, his face flushed with panic. He was hunched over his desk, frantically dabbing at a document with wadded paper towels, making the damage worse with each desperate swipe. Coffee spread across white paper like blood on snow. In 8 years of night cleaning, it was a scene she'd witnessed countless times, panicked employees ruining important documents. But something about this felt different. Rachel approached cautiously, her cartwheels squeaking softly on marble floors. The closer she got, the more desperate the situation became. The man's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper towels. The coffee stain had spread across what looked like a merger contract, official seals smudged, signatures bleeding into brown liquid. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. The man didn't acknowledge Rachel at all as she appeared in his doorway. He simply continued his frantic, useless dabbing, muttering numbers under his breath. 48 hours, 48 hours. Can't reprint. They'll know. They'll see the timestamps. Rachel cleared her throat gently. Excuse me, sir. I might be able to help. The man's head snapped up. His eyes were dark, calculating, and for just a moment something cold flickered across his face. Not relief, but assessment, like he was measuring her worth. Then the expression vanished, replaced by desperate gratitude. You can fix this? His voice cracked. Please, this contract is worth everything. If I can't present it tomorrow morning... May I? Rachel gestured to the document. He stepped back, and Rachel moved in with her blue microfiber cloth and a small spray bottle from her cart. She'd learned this trick from an old janitor in her first year, a specific mixture that lifted coffee without disturbing ink, if you worked fast. Enough! And didn't press too hard. She worked in careful, gentle circles, blotting rather than rubbing. The coffee lifted slowly, leaving the signatures and text intact. The man watched her hands with an intensity that made her skin crawl, but Rachel dismissed it as the stress of someone about to lose something important. 3 minutes later, the document was saved. Slightly wrinkled, but legible. All the signatures are clear. All the official seals are intact. There, Rachel said softly, stepping back with a small smile. Good as new. Just let it air dry for about 10 minutes before you touch it. The man stared at the document, then at Rachel. His expression was unreadable, cold, flat, like a shark's eyes. What's your name? He asked. Rachel. Rachel Spates. She smiled, thinking she'd made a connection. Maybe even a powerful ally who'd remember the cleaning lady who saved his career. Rachel Spates, he repeated slowly, as if committing it to memory. Not gratitude in his voice, something else, something that sounded almost like a threat. But Rachel was already backing out of the office, gathering her cart. "Have a good night, sir. Glad I could help." She didn't see the way Jim Johnson watched her leave. Didn't see the smile that spread across his face, cold, calculated, predatory. Didn't see him pull out his phone and text security, "Need personnel file for night cleaning staff." Name: Rachel Spates. Priority. Rachel hummed softly as she moved to the next office, thinking about Emma's tuition, about the smile on her daughter's face when Rachel told her the payment was secure. She thought she had saved a man's career. She had no idea she'd just signed her own arrest warrant. The document she'd so carefully cleaned wasn't a legitimate merger contract. It was a forgery. $48 million in embezzled funds hidden in fake subsidiary transfers, complete with forged board signatures Jim had spent 3 months perfecting. And Rachel Spates, the kind cleaning lady with her clever trick and her gentle smile, was now the only witness to Jim Johnson tampering with evidence late at night. She had 12 hours before everything changed. 12 hours before kindness became a crime. Rachel Spates became invisible at exactly 11 p.m. every night. That was when the last executives finally abandoned their glass-walled offices, leaving behind the debris of ambition. Half-empty coffee cups with lipstick stains, crumpled spreadsheets, the faint smell of expensive cologne, and desperation. By 11:15, the 40th floor of Sterling Finance belonged entirely to Rachel and her cleaning cart. She preferred it this way. In the silence, she could work methodically, moving through the spaces like a ghost. Desk by desk, office by office, spray bottle in one hand, microfiber cloth in the other. The rhythm was meditative. Spray, wipe, move. She knew every surface intimately, which mahogany desks showed fingerprints worst, which glass walls needed extra attention, which executives were actually working versus just arranging props to look busy. The few late-working staff who passed her never made eye contact. To them she was furniture, a function, not a person. Rachel had learned not to take it personally. She would murmur, "Excuse me," when her cart blocked a pathway, and they would brush past without acknowledgement, already on their phones, already thinking about the next deal. Rachel didn't mind being invisible. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant steady employment. Invisible meant she could afford Emma's tuition at Riverside Prep. She pulled out her phone during her break and looked at the wallpaper photo. Emma in her school uniform, gap-toothed smile, holding up a perfect math test. 7 years old and already smarter than Rachel had ever been. That was the point. To give Emma opportunities Rachel never had. To make sure her daughter never cleaned other people's messes at midnight just to survive. The tuition bill was due Friday. $2,800. Rachel had been saving for 6 months, pulling double shifts, skipping lunches, wearing the same 3 uniforms until they were threadbare. She was exactly $400 short, which meant she needed this week's paycheck, every single night. No sick days, no mistakes. Rachel returned to her cart and moved to the executive wing. The atmosphere here was different, heavier. Thicker carpet that muffled footsteps, original artwork on walls, offices twice the normal size with panoramic city views. She emptied trash bins filled with printed emails, wiped keyboards executives probably hadn't typed on themselves, and polished glass that would be fingerprinted again by tomorrow afternoon. The building hummed around her. HVAC systems, distant elevator chimes, security guard footsteps 3 floors down. This was Rachel's world, the silent spaces between ambition, the clean slate she created every night so the powerful could make their messes all over again. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Her reflection appeared and disappeared in the glass walls as she moved, a phantom in a navy blue uniform, pushing her cart through empty corridors where decisions worth millions were made during daylight hours. She didn't know that tonight. Her invisibility was about to become the most dangerous thing about her. Didn't know that being noticed by the wrong person would turn her greatest asset into her biggest liability. Rachel pushed her cart toward the corner office, humming softly, thinking about Emma's smile, about making Friday's payment, about keeping their small life stable. Just another night. Just another shift. Until it wasn't. The cursing came from the corner office, Jim Johnson's office, though Rachel didn't know his name yet. She paused her cart outside the half-open door. Inside, a man in a $5,000 suit was destroying a document with paper towels, each frantic dab spreading the coffee stain wider. His hands shook. Sweat darkened his collar despite the aggressive air conditioning. Rachel had seen this panic before. Important documents ruined, careers hanging by thread. She'd learned long ago that sometimes the smallest act of competence could mean everything to these people. She knocked softly on the glass. "Excuse me, sir. I might be able to help." The man's head snapped up. His eyes were dark, sharp, assessing her in a way that made Rachel's skin prickle. But then his expression shifted to desperate relief, and she dismissed her instinct as paranoia. "You can fix this?" His voice cracked. "This contract, I can't reprint it. The timestamps. They'll know it was altered." Rachel moved closer, examining the damage. Coffee had spread across official seals and signatures, bleeding into dense legal text. Most people would call it ruined, but Rachel had 8 years of experience with disasters. "I can try," she said quietly, "but you'll need to step back and let me work." She retrieved her blue microfiber cloth and a small, unmarked spray bottle from the bottom shelf of her cart. The solution inside was her own mixture, something an old janitor had taught her during her first year. Part white vinegar, part rubbing alcohol, part distilled water. The ratios had to be exact, and the technique even more precise. Rachel sprayed lightly, just enough to dampen the cloth without soaking it. Then she began working in small, gentle circles, blotting rather than wiping. The trick was patience. Pressure would smudge the ink. Too much liquid would cause it to run. But done correctly, the coffee would lift while leaving everything else intact. Jim watched her hands like a predator watching prey. Not with gratitude, with calculation. Rachel felt his stare but kept working, focused on saving the document. 3 minutes later, she stepped back. The paper was slightly wrinkled, faintly discolored where the coffee had been, but every signature was legible, every seal intact, every word of text is readable. "There," Rachel said, allowing herself a small smile. "Just let it air dry for about 10 minutes before you touch it." Jim stared at the document, then slowly lifted his eyes to her face. His expression was completely flat. Empty. "What's your name?" "Rachel. Rachel Spatz." She gestured to her name tag, thinking maybe he'd remember her kindness, maybe recommend her for a raise. "I'm glad I could help, Mr. Johnson. Jim Johnson." He didn't offer his hand, didn't smile. "Rachel Spatz," he repeated, his voice cold and deliberate, as if memorizing a target. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine, but dismissed it. Rich people were weird. Everyone knew that. "Well, have a good night, Mr. Johnson." She backed toward her cart. "Rachel." His voice stopped her at the door. "That cleaning solution, is it something anyone can buy?" "No, sir. It's a trade secret. Something I learned years ago." Jim's smile didn't reach his eyes. "A trade secret. How fortunate that you were here. Tonight." Rachel left the office, already thinking about the next suite that needed cleaning. She didn't see Jim pull out his phone. Didn't see him type a message to security requesting her personnel file. Didn't see the way his fingers traced the coffee-stained document, his smile widening. She'd just made herself the only witness to his crime. And Jim Johnson didn't leave witnesses. Rachel arrived for her Thursday night shift at 10:45 p.m., 15 minutes early as always. She swiped her ID badge at the service entrance and headed towards the supply closet where she stored her cart. 2 security guards were waiting. Rachel Spates? The older one, Davidson, had never learned her name in 8 years. Now he said it like an accusation. Yes? Rachel's hand tightened on her purse strap. Is something wrong? You need to come with us. Now. They didn't explain, didn't answer her questions, just flanked her on either side and escorted her to the executive conference room on the 40th floor, a space she'd cleaned 1,000 times but never entered during business hours. Jim Johnson stood at the head of the table, immaculate in a charcoal suit, his expression grave and disappointed. 3 people from HR sat along one side. 2 more security guards stood by the door. On the polished mahogany table sat Rachel's cleaning cart, and lying on top of it, in a clear evidence bag, was a tablet she'd never seen before. Miss Spates, Jim said, his voice heavy with false regret. Please sit down. Rachel's legs felt weak. What's going on? What is that? That's what we'd like to know. The HR director, a severe woman named Patricia Klein, slid the evidence bag toward her. This tablet was found in your cleaning cart during a routine security sweep this morning. It contains proprietary financial data, merger documents, client portfolios, information worth millions of dollars. Rachel stared at the tablet. That's not mine. I've never seen it before. It was in your cart, Davidson said flatly. Then someone put it there. Rachel's voice rose. I would never. Miss Spates. Jim's interruption was smooth, practiced. I understand this is difficult, but we need you to be honest with us. Last night you were in my office. You saw confidential documents on my desk. I was cleaning a coffee stain. You asked me to help. Jim's expression shifted to something that almost looked like pity. Almost. I didn't ask you for anything. You appeared in my doorway uninvited while I was working on sensitive materials. When I left to take a phone call, you were alone in my office for nearly 3 minutes. That's not, Rachel's breath caught. That's not what happened. Security footage shows you entering my office at 11:42 p.m., Patricia said, consulting a folder. Mr. Johnson left at 11:43. You remained until 11:46. 3 minutes. Plenty of time to photograph documents. Rachel felt the room tilting. This was insane. She'd helped him, saved his document. And now? The tablet contains photos taken at 11:44 p.m., Jim said quietly. Time-stamped, geotagged to my office, confidential merger details that only 5 people in this company should have access to. I didn't take any photos. Rachel stood, her chair scraping back. This is a setup. He's lying. Miss Spates, we're trying to give you a chance to explain, Patricia said. If you cooperate, tell us who you're working for, and we might be able to avoid criminal charges. Rachel looked around the room. Every face was closed, suspicious, already convinced of her guilt. The security guards had moved closer to the doors, and Jim Johnson watched her with those cold, empty eyes, his expression perfectly crafted into concerned disappointment. She'd saved his career, and he was destroying hers. Patricia Klein opened a leather portfolio and clicked her pen with the precision of an executioner. Let's go through this again, Miss Spates. From the beginning. Rachel's hands shook in her lap. She'd told the story 3 times already. Each retelling sounded more desperate, less believable. I heard him cursing. The document had a coffee stain. I offered to help clean it, that's all. You offered to help a senior executive you'd never spoken to before? Patricia's tone dripped skepticism. Yes, I clean this building. I know how to remove stains without damaging paper. It's my job. Your job is to empty trash bins and wipe desks, Davidson cut in, not to involve yourself in executive business. Jim leaned forward, his expression pained, as if this whole situation hurt him personally. Rachel. May I call you Rachel? He didn't wait for an answer. I've been thinking about last night, trying to understand, and I realize now that I may have misread the situation. Rachel looked at him, a flicker of hope igniting despite herself. You remember? You remember asking me to help? I remember you appearing in my doorway while I was working. His voice was gentle, reasonable, the voice of a man trying to be fair. I was stressed, distracted. I may have said something dismissive like whatever or fine when you asked if you could come in, but I never invited you to approach my desk, never asked you to touch confidential documents. That's not... You said something about a trade secret cleaning solution. Jim's eyes locked on hers. I remember that specifically because it struck me as odd. Why would a cleaning lady have trade secrets, unless gathering information was part of your actual trade? The HR director made a note. The security guards shifted position. Rachel felt reality warping around her. Jim was rewriting history in real time, turning her kindness into espionage, her helpfulness into infiltration. And everyone in this room believed him. The document you cleaned, Patricia said. Can you describe it? It was a contract. Merger papers, I think. With coffee spilled across. How did you know it was a merger contract? Jim interrupted softly. What? You said merger papers. How would a night cleaner recognize merger documentation? His eyebrows raised in polite curiosity. Unless you were specifically looking for it? Rachel's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She'd walked directly into his trap. Perhaps whoever hired you told you what to look for, Patricia suggested. Corporate espionage is a serious federal crime, Miss Spates. If you cooperate now, tell us who you're working for. The prosecutor might show leniency. I'm not working for anyone, Rachel's voice cracked. I have a 7-year-old daughter. I clean offices so I can pay her tuition. That's all I do. That's all I am. Jim stood slowly, buttoning his suit jacket. I think we've heard enough. This is clearly distressing for everyone involved. Patricia, why don't we let Miss Spates collect herself while we review the security footage again? He glanced at Rachel, and for just a fraction of a second, his mask slipped. She saw it then, the cold satisfaction in his eyes, the pleasure he took in her terror. He was enjoying this. Rachel understood with absolute clarity that Jim Johnson hadn't just framed her to cover his crime. He'd chosen her specifically because she was invisible, disposable, powerless, because destroying her would be easy, and because he could. We're calling the police, Patricia said, closing her portfolio with finality. Miss Spates, you'll wait here until they arrive to take your statement. Rachel's vision blurred. Police, criminal charges, federal crime. Emma was going into foster care while her mother sat in a jail cell for something she didn't do. Davidson positioned himself at the door, arms crossed. The other security guard pulled out his radio, murmuring something about detaining a suspect on 40. I need to use the bathroom, Rachel said quietly. Patricia sighed. Davidson, escort her. Stay outside the door. Rachel stood on shaking legs and followed Davidson into the hallway. Her mind raced. Once the police arrived, it was over. Jim's story was polished, supported by planted evidence and security footage edited to remove context. Her word, the word of a minimum wage cleaner, meant nothing against a senior executive. She had maybe 10 minutes before squad cars pulled up outside. Davidson led her to the executive restroom near the elevators. Make it quick, he said, positioning himself outside the door. Rachel entered, locked the door, and forced herself to breathe. Think. The bathroom had one exit, back through Davidson. But the executive restrooms had something the regular ones didn't: access panels for plumbing maintenance. She knew because she'd cleaned them for 8 years. Rachel moved quickly to the large mirror and pushed. The mirror swung open on hidden hinges, revealing a narrow maintenance corridor that ran behind the wall. Every cleaner knew about these spaces, the building's secret veins where pipes, wires, and service access lived. She squeezed through and pulled the mirror shut behind her. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency strips along the floor. Rachel moved fast, her soft-soled work shoes silent on concrete. She knew exactly where she was going. The south stairwell, 2 corridors over, where the service elevator lived. The service elevator required a key that only facilities staff carried. Rachel still had hers on her keyring. She reached the elevator and jabbed the down button. The ancient machinery groaned to life, cables creaking, too slow, too loud. Footsteps echoed in the hallway behind her. "Spates! Rachel Spates! Stop!" The elevator doors opened. Rachel lunged inside and jammed her key into the override slot, punching B3, the sub-basement where maintenance and loading docks were located. The doors slid shut just as Davidson rounded the corner. The elevator lurched downward. Above her, alarms began to wail. Red emergency lights flickered on throughout the shaft. "Attention all security personnel!" A voice crackled over the building's PA system. "We have a code yellow. Suspect is fleeing. Initiate lockdown protocols. Repeat, the building is now on lockdown. Suspect is Rachel Spates, a 32-year-old female, 5'6", with brown hair, wearing a navy blue cleaning uniform. She is to be detained immediately and held for police custody. She is considered dangerous. Do not let her leave the building." The elevator shuddered to a stop at B3. Rachel stepped out into the maintenance level, a maze of boiler rooms, storage areas, and service tunnels she knew better than anyone in this building. They'd made a mistake putting her somewhere she was invisible, because invisible people saw everything. The sub-basement was Rachel's territory. 8 years of night shifts meant she knew every pipe, every access panel, every forgotten corner of Sterling Finance's infrastructure. While security guards checked obvious hiding spots, storage rooms, electrical closets, loading docks, Rachel was already climbing a maintenance ladder into the ceiling plenum above the 39th floor. The plenum was the space between floors where HVAC ducts, electrical conduits, and structural supports lived. Hot, cramped, and pitch black except for her phone's flashlight. Rachel crawled across steel beams, trying not to think about the 40-story drop beneath the thin floor panels. Below her, she heard voices, footsteps, radio chatter. Nothing in the south stairwell. "Loading dock is clear." "She's got to be in the building somewhere. Lock down every exit." Then a new voice cut through the radio static. Smooth, authoritative, taking command. Jim Johnson. "Gentlemen, let me help coordinate the search. I know how these corporate spies operate. Rachel Spates is trained, resourceful, and dangerous. She's probably already destroyed evidence or transmitted data to her handlers." Rachel pressed her ear to a ventilation grate, listening. "We need to find her before the police arrive," Jim continued. "For the company's sake. If she's arrested publicly, this becomes a media circus. Sterling's reputation suffers. Better if we handle this quietly, internally." Translation. Better if he found her first. Better if there were no witnesses to contradict his story. Rachel crawled forward through the plenum, navigating by muscle memory toward the executive wing. If she could reach the server room, maybe she could access email records, security footage, something to prove Jim had planted that tablet. A voice crackled below. "Mr. Johnson, the police are 10 minutes out." "Understood. Keep searching. I'll check the upper floors." Footsteps moved away. Then silence. Rachel was about to move when she heard Jim's voice again, quieter now. On a phone call. "It's handled. No, she won't talk to the police. She won't get the chance. The evidence is airtight. Tablet in her cart, photos time-stamped, security footage edited. Even if she claims I planted it, who's going to believe a cleaning lady over me? Rachel froze, barely breathing. Jim's voice dropped lower, almost amused. The merger papers? Perfect forgery. Board signatures, subsidiary transfers, all of it. 48 million routes through the shell companies tonight, and by Monday, I'm in the Caymans. Yes, the original document had coffee on it. Stupid mistake. But that idiotic cleaner fixed it for me, then became a liability. Rachel's hands shook. She fumbled for her phone, trying to start recording. She'll disappear into the system, Jim continued. Federal charges, no bail, public defender who doesn't care. By the time anyone questions the evidence, I'm gone and the money's clean. No loose ends, I promise. Rachel's recording app glowed in the darkness. She had it. Proof. Confession. A beam creaked beneath her weight. The sound echoed through the plenum like a gunshot. Below, Jim's voice stopped mid-sentence. Hold on, he said into the phone. Then louder. Hello, is someone there? Rachel didn't breathe. I'm on 39, Jim said into his radio. I think our rat is in the ceiling. Rachel dropped through an access panel into a maintenance corridor and ran. Behind her, security boots thundered across metal catwalks, flashlight beams cutting through darkness. She had Jim's confession recorded on her phone, but that meant nothing if she couldn't get it to the police before Jim's men found her. She burst through a door marked Mechanical Room, Authorized Personnel Only, and nearly collided with someone in the shadows. A flashlight beam hit her face. Easy, easy. The voice was calm, weathered. Rachel Spates, right? The cleaner they're hunting. Rachel's heart hammered. She recognized him now. Arthur Webb, the night watchman. 72 years old, worked the graveyard shift for 20 years. They'd exchanged pleasantries 1,000 times during her rounds. Please, Rachel whispered. I didn't do what they're saying. Jim Johnson planted evidence. He's embezzling millions and framing me for it. Arthur studied her for a long moment. Then he lowered his flashlight and gestured deeper into the mechanical room. Come on, before they check down here. He led her behind a massive boiler into a space invisible from the doorway. Rachel followed, her legs shaking with exhaustion and fear. Jim Johnson's dirty, Arthur said quietly, settling onto an upturned crate. Known it for 2 years. Caught him in the server room at 3 a.m. once. Claimed he was working late. Man like that doesn't do his own IT work. You believe me? I've worked security in corporate buildings for 40 years, Rachel. I know the difference between a thief and someone getting railroaded. He pulled out a walkie-talkie and switched it off. Now what's your play? Because hiding in my boiler room isn't a long-term solution. Rachel pulled out her phone, hands trembling. I recorded him, confessing to the forgery, admitting he planted the tablet. But I need more than just audio. I need proof of the actual crime. Arthur's eyes sharpened. The merger documents, the ones he forged. He printed them, which means there's a digital file somewhere on the company servers. Server room's on 42, Arthur said, but it's locked down, card access only, admin credentials required. I don't have admin credentials. No. Arthur smiled grimly. But I have something better. A master override key for building emergencies. Fire code requires physical access to all systems in case of evacuation. He pulled a brass key from his pocket. Gets you into the server room. But getting the files? That's beyond me. I push buttons to print my timesheet. Rachel thought fast. The IT guy. The one who works nights sometimes. He showed me once how to access the printer logs to find documents people left behind. If Jim printed those merger papers, there'll be a record. A digital trail. Smart, Arthur stood, his knees creaking. But Jim's got security crawling all over this building. You can't just waltz up to 42. The service shafts. I can climb them." Arthur looked at her, this exhausted, terrified woman in a cleaning uniform, hunted by armed guards and a millionaire executive, and nodded slowly. "You've got guts, Rachel Spates. Let's go catch ourselves a thief." Arthur's master key got Rachel into the server room at 1:47 a.m. She moved fast, her fingers flying across the keyboard, while Arthur stood guard at the door. The printer logs showed exactly what she needed. Jim Johnson had printed the forged merger documents at 11:38 p.m. the night before, right before Rachel found him with the coffee-stained copy. The original PDF was still in the print queue. Rachel downloaded it, along with the metadata showing Jim's login credentials, timestamp, and the shell company bank accounts buried in the subsidiary transfer schedules. $48 million, all the proof she needed. "Police are in the lobby," Arthur whispered, checking his phone. "3 squad cars. They're asking for you by name." Rachel's mind raced. She had evidence, but Jim controlled the narrative. If she walked downstairs now, security would tackle her before she reached the officers. Jim would call her desperate, claim she'd hacked the servers to fabricate evidence. She needed Jim to confess. Publicly. Undeniably. Rachel pulled up the building's fire alarm system on the server terminal. "Arthur, how fast can you get to the lobby?" 2 minutes. Why?" "When I trigger the fire alarm, you need to make sure the police don't leave. Tell them you have evidence. Keep them in the lobby no matter what." Arthur's eyes widened. "What are you planning?" Rachel was already typing. "Something that'll either save my life or end it." She triggered the fire alarm on the 40th floor only. Sirens wailed. Emergency lights flashed. Through the security camera feeds, Rachel watched Jim and his security team evacuate toward the stairwells, but Jim's office door didn't open. Rachel had remotely engaged the electronic lock. Another thing she'd learned watching the IT guy work. The system showed Jim alone in his office, pulling the handle, confusion shifting to rage as he realized he was trapped. Rachel switched on the intercom system. Her voice echoed through Jim's office speakers. "Hello, Jim." On the security feed, Jim spun toward the speaker on his desk. "Rachel, where are you?" "Somewhere you can't touch me. I have the files, Jim. The real merger documents, the forged signatures, the shell company accounts, all of it." "You're insane. No one will believe—" "I also have a recording of your phone call, the one where you admitted to embezzling $48 million, where you laughed about framing me." Jim's face went white, then red. "You can't use illegally obtained recordings in court." "Maybe, maybe not. But I can send them to every news outlet in Seattle. Wonder what Sterling's board will think when they hear their senior partner is a thief." Jim slammed his fist on the desk. "You're a nobody, a cleaner. You think you can threaten me?" Rachel leaned closer to the microphone. "I already have." Jim's control shattered. He lunged at the locked door, pounding on the glass. "You think you're clever? You think you've won? I will destroy you. I will bury you so deep you'll never see daylight. When I get out of here, and I will, I'm going to make you disappear. You and your brat daughter. Nobody crosses Jim Johnson. Nobody." His screams echoed through the office, violent and unhinged. What Jim didn't know, what Rachel had activated 30 seconds before confronting him, was that his office intercom wasn't just receiving. It was broadcasting. Every word, every threat, every confession was streaming live through the building's PA system. To the lobby. 3 police officers stood with Arthur Webb, listening to everything. Rachel descended from the server room using the service elevator, Arthur at her side. Her phone held everything. The forged documents, the metadata, the recording of Jim's phone confession, and now his live PA broadcast where he'd threatened to make her and Emma disappear. The lobby was in chaos. Police officers had Jim face down on the marble floor, handcuffs glinting under crystal chandeliers. He was still screaming, his polished executive veneer completely shattered. "You can't arrest me. Do you know who I am? I'll have your badges, You have the right to remain silent," the officer said flatly. "I'd suggest you use it." Security guards who'd been hunting Rachel 15 minutes ago now stood frozen, watching their commanding executive reduced to a thrashing, cursing criminal. Patricia Klein from HR stared in horror, her leather portfolio forgotten at her feet. The Sterling Finance CEO, Richard Sterling himself, stood near the entrance in a hastily thrown-on suit. He spotted Rachel emerging from the service corridor and crossed the lobby in 3 strides. "Miss Spates." His voice carried the weight of genuine shame. "I cannot begin to apologize for what has happened to you tonight." Rachel stood straighter, meeting his eyes. "Your employee tried to frame me for his crimes. He threatened my daughter." "I know. We all heard." Sterling glanced at Jim being hauled to his feet by the police. "The board will conduct a full investigation. Your personnel file will be cleared completely. Any legal expenses you've incurred, the company will cover, and—" He hesitated. "We'd like to offer you a position in facilities management, a significant raise, benefits, oversight of night operations." Rachel thought about Emma, about tuition bills and double shifts, and being invisible for 8 years. "I'll think about it," she said quietly. Sterling nodded. "That's more than fair." The police led Jim past her. He looked broken, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face twisted with impotent rage. Their eyes met for just a moment. "You were nobody," he hissed. "You were nothing." "I was the woman who saw everything you tried to hide," Rachel said calmly. "Turns out being invisible has its advantages." Jim's mouth opened, but the officer pulled him toward the door before he could respond. Arthur appeared at Rachel's elbow, grinning. That was something, Rachel Spates. That was really something. Rachel walked towards the building's front entrance, past executives and security guards who now stepped aside, who now met her eyes, who now saw her as a person instead of furniture. The automatic doors opened to the pre-dawn darkness. Emma would be waking up soon. Rachel needed to get home to hold her daughter and tell her that everything would be okay. Better than okay. She stepped out into the cool Seattle air, no longer invisible, no longer afraid, holding her head high. Sometimes the smallest people cast the longest shadows. And sometimes kindness to the wrong person changes everything. Just not in the way anyone expects. You just watched Rachel Spates go from invisible to unstoppable in under an hour. But here's what kills me. Most of you will close this video and forget she exists. When I release the next story about a woman who discovers her husband has a second family, you won't be able to see it because you haven't subscribed. Don't let the algorithm decide what you miss. Hit that subscribe button and bell icon right now. Do it for Rachel. Do it for every underdog who refuses to stay down. See you in the next one. If you're brave enough to click.